Thank you. Thank you, Maya. Aloha, everyone. Thank you for coming. I think we are still waiting, possibly for a couple more folks to join us, but I would like us to start on time, and so I call this meeting to order. Karan, can we have the roll call, please?
Sorry. It's just
Okay, Karan, I think you're unmuted, so if you wanted to go, I think you can.
Maybe Corinne is having a problem with her audio.
I think so. Am I allowed to do roll call?
Matthew,
Take
I
roll.
can.
Sure.
Okay, Matthew. Okay, Matt, you're
Can you
gonna
hear
do
me?
roll call. Thank
Oh,
you.
there you go, Karan. Yep.
just
I'll start. Chair Aligato,
Present.
Vice Chair Keener,
Present.
Commissioner Romine,
Present. Aloha, everybody.
Commissioner Atsuka, we received an update that she should be joining shortly, and Commissioner Islam informed us that she's unavailable today. So currently, we still have quorum, Chair.
Thank you so much, Director Gonzer. Before we get started on the agenda, I did want to request actually an amendment to the agenda that we need to vote on. Just because of, and I take responsibility for just being slow on informing OCCSR, I would like to request to add to our agenda a presentation by Dr. Netta Crawford. Dr. Crawford is the Montague Burton Chair in International Relations at Oxford, and is also the co-founder and co-director of the Costs of War Project. And I've invited her to speak on military, the US military and global change. And so with that in mind, can I get a motion to amend the agenda?
I'll motion to amend the agenda.
May I have a second?
Second that, Chair.
Okay, and then according to our rules, we have to vote on it. So all in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, and we have a majority quorum, so we're going to amend the agenda. And then in consideration for the time difference, because Dr. Crawford's presenting is in the UK right now, which is a 12-hour time difference. So first of all, we're very, very grateful to have her assent to present to us today. We're going to let her present first. So I'm going to allow her to share screen. And so, as I said, Dr. Crawford is the Montague Burton Chair and in International Relations. She also holds a professorial fellowship at the Balliol College, and while she was at Brown University, was the co-founder and co-director of the Costs of War Project. And so, thank you so much. We're really grateful to have you here presenting for us today. As we begin discussions on a climate guidance brief, a climate document for our city and county of Honolulu on what might be the impacts of the US military on Oahu's climate resilience.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Yeah, my name's Nita Crawford, as you've indicated, and it is the next day for me. So I'm sitting here trying to stay awake but I'm really grateful for the opportunity to be with you. And I'm going to give you some data. I know you know climate change, but I'm going to give you some data, hopefully things you've never heard of or can put in perspective. So what I wanted to talk about was, first of all, the big picture, and then to try to put your context in there. Right now, the United States has about 700, a little bit more than 700 military bases around the world. And that doesn't include the bases in the United States itself. And you can see from this image, they're everywhere. But Hawaii is the home of, as you know, Indo-Pacific Command and many other installations. It's crucial in the United States pivot to Asia and the Pacific. It's been crucial to the United States military doctrine for a long time. And what, in part, I'm going to tell you is a sort of longer range story, but then also looking into the future. So what we have is the United States military, being the largest and most capable military in the world, is also one of the world's largest energy users. It is the United States' single largest energy user, the DoD, Department of Defense, including all of its arms, the Army, Air Force, the Navy, is the United States' single largest energy user. It consumes about 70% of all US government energy. And this is from the FY 2022 DoD Annual Energy Performance Resilience and Readiness Report. And what it does is it breaks down the operational energy, that is the energy used for operations and exercises and not really the day-to-day so much. And then there's the installation energy. So operational energy is the bulk of the energy that is used. And that's about 68% in that year of US military energy use was for operations. And operations in any year could include war, but as well as the exercises. But installations and bases are sort of a constant. And they constitute about 32% of the energy use and hence the emissions associated with it. So to fuel all of this activity, the United States has the Defense Logistics Agency, and it has locations all over the world. They say their footprint is global. That's sort of their slogan. And what you see here are the headquarters in the United States, but the regional offices and also many bases have their own supplies of either fuel and storage or the capacity for refueling. I know you're familiar with refueling and Red Hill in particular. I won't go into that. What you also see, however, is that this whole thing, this whole infrastructure and operations has a greenhouse gas footprint. And here's the calculation that I did for the Cost of War project and then later my book, The Pentagon, Climate Change and War, where I looked at US military greenhouse gas emissions from 1975 to 2022. And those are the early years I had to calculate because that data wasn't available. But the later years, that data is available, and you see it here. And what you see is a couple of things. One is that emissions and energy use really, frankly, vary with operations. So they go up and down, depending on what's going on. But there's a very interesting trend in the post-Cold War period from 1991 to the beginning of the 9/11 wars, and that is US military missions went down dramatically because the number of exercises, operations, and bases decreased. The size of the US military decreased in that peace period. And you also see here on this that the United States has begun to reduce its emissions more generally in the post 9/11 war period because of the base realignment and closure that happened up to 2005 and because of greater efficiencies. So these greater efficiencies are driven by the need to not be vulnerable to running out of fuel in distant locations. And they're also due to an increasing concern with climate change more recently. Now, what I also wanted to let you know about was how military emissions track military spending very tightly. And why is that important? Well, the United States is increasing its military spending. We've seen its military emissions go down, but the world at large is increasing their military spending. Global military spending has been for the last several years over 2 trillion. Now, the United States is 38% of that. It's larger than its adversaries combined. But the fact that global military spending is going up, and it's really tightly tied to greenhouse gas emissions, means that the share of military emissions goes up as powers respond to ongoing conflicts with their own militarization, or they respond to increased tensions, such as with the US and China, or the US with Russia, and NATO's increasing military spending. Now, I want to zoom in. As I said, I was going to get a little tighter on what you really care about, which is Hawaii and Oahu in particular. So RIMPAC exercises are ongoing. As I know you've seen, what I have here on this slide is a sense of the scale of RIMPAC. When RIMPAC began, it was really just a handful of countries in the early 1970s doing the exercises. There were 5 countries participating in the first exercise in 1971. In the period subsequent to that, up until 1992, it was about the same number, about 5 countries in any one year of the exercises. But in the period from 2008 and 10 and 12, that is with the Obama administration's pivot to Asia and the Pacific, the scale of the exercises has increased dramatically, that in terms of the number of participants. And you've got countries coming from as far away as Italy and the United Kingdom and France. Now, France has possessions in the Pacific, but Brazil's also there. Many countries are traveling quite far. And what you see is not only naval equipment, but what I haven't shown here are, for instance, this year, of the 29 nations attending, 14 countries are bringing land forces, and many countries are bringing air forces. And then some of those will stick around, but they have, all of this has an emissions footprint. And this is because the exercises, as you know, are extensive, a huge operating area. This is the image from the Department of Defense for their 2018 RIMPAC. Obviously, Hawaii is in the middle of the operating area. Southern California is sometimes involved. Southern California will not be involved, or has not been involved in this year's exercises. And what you see here is a concentration of many countries operating with their associated greenhouse gas emissions from their operations, but also when they're on land. Let's say when they're at the Pearl Harbor Hickam base, or when they're doing exercises such as simulated or actual live fire amphibious assault, or when the ships are docked, they're drawing energy from, let's say, the local grid in Honolulu. So I've done a calculation that is just a preliminary calculation of the fuel use from one exercise where the Defense Logistics Agency, which I described earlier, got the request or the requirement to provide 142,000 gallons of Navy fuel and approximately 140,000 gallons of jet fuel for aircraft. And then what you can do is, based on that fuel use, calculate the emissions if all of the fuel is used. And if you add it up, it's about 2.6 million metric tons of CO2 from just the 2016 exercises. Now, the 2016 exercises, if you recall that earlier slide, are about the same size in terms of number of people, but not number of nations from the current exercise. So this is a rough approximation that every time there's an exercise, since the exercises have increased in size in the last decade, it's about 2.5 million metric ton CO2 equivalent. Now, of course, that's global. The CO2 is global, but it has a local impact in terms of increasing the total CO2 in the atmosphere. Then the CO2 then comes into the oceans and makes the oceans acidic. And it also hurts marine life to have these exercises. Now, the thing I've talked about earlier was the direct emissions from exercises and installations and operations such as war. But there's also the loss of sequestration that comes from damage to environments. So damage to wetlands, damage to forests from bases, and also damage to marine life. And the sequestration function, in particular, that marine mammals like whales perform. And the whales are damaged by sonar. We know that they are harmed by that, but they're also in some cases damaged or killed by strikes. And there haven't been many strikes, but there have been some. And so if you put the picture together, the consequences are global. There are also local consequences to the huge ocean area surrounding you. And there are feedback effects, vulnerabilities that because of sea level rise, greater concentration of moisture causing more violent rainstorms, more violent weather, greater concentration of moisture in the atmosphere, that is. And these are all significant. But then, in addition, there's the argument, and I'll just raise it with you, but I don't necessarily think that it's super relevant at this moment. The United States is anticipating that because of the consequences of climate change, rising sea levels, greater typhoons, greater flooding, increased heat, drought, wildfires, that people will be in conflict. And the image that I'm showing from the climate risk analysis of the Department of Defense in 2021 says that conflict, that's those fists coming together, is coming to certain regions because of climate change. Now, the main message is we don't have to have these conflicts. We don't have to have such high emissions. The Department of Defense itself has said that they have 20% excess base capacity. So they know that they can reduce the size and the number of their bases. They can get greater efficiencies. They can also, in fact, rethink the structure of the US military. Do we need to have this pivot to Asia be such a large mobilization that requires the United States and other countries who are responding to the United States or working with the United States to increase the size of their military and their military spending? So there's another world is possible. We can rethink these things. So I'm happy to take any questions. I hope I haven't gone too long. And I'll stop sharing unless you want to look at an image again.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so very much, Dr. Crawford. What I'm going to do at this time, as is normal for our commission, is I'm going to open up questions for the commissioners, and then we will open it up to the public. And what I would ask is for the public to please identify yourself either by raising your Zoom hand or putting in the chat what your question is, and then I will recognize you. And then, as is typical for all of our commission meetings, testimony or questions are approximately 3 minutes in length. Okay, so with that in mind, I will open it up starting with Vice Chair Keener. Do you have any questions?
Thank you for the presentation, and thanks so much for being up at a terrible time on the other side of the world. That was very interesting, and I don't have questions at this time, but I'm eager to get a copy of the PowerPoint and look it over to see how it can fit in more with the work and the research that we're already doing. But thank you.
Commissioner Romine?
No questions at this time either, but thank you for joining us. Yeah, I guess early in the morning where you are, but appreciate the very, very helpful information. I certainly learned a few things, so thank you. Appreciate it.
And Commissioner Otsuka?
Hi, sorry, I jumped on a little late. I also don't have any questions. I just wanted to thank you, Dr. Crawford, and thank the chair for inviting you. I'm really happy to hear that we're talking about the climate impacts of RIMPAC. So I think it is putting an additional strain on our resources, as you sort of outlined and identified. And I'm not sure that's talked about enough. So I just want to thank both the chair and the speaker. So thank you.
Thank you. I'll ask some questions before turning it over to the public. So my understanding is that part of the Biden administration was that all federal agencies had to put out a climate change strategy plan. And so my understanding is that I've seen, the Army and the Navy and the Air Force plans. Have you examined them, and do you see if they have addressed kind of the interaction of their activities with decreasing emission, the need to decrease emissions?
Yes, I've read the plans and I've read some of their early reports on what they think they've accomplished, and they have set what appear to be ambitious goals. For example, the Army, Navy, and Air Force have said that they're going to be net zero, I think, by 2050. They have a goal to be engaged in a 50% reduction in emissions. I think it's from a baseline of 2005 or 2008, depending on the service. And they don't give the number of the emissions that they had in 2005 or 2008, but according to my calculation, they're well on their way. They've had a 40% reduction in, I think it's the Army's emissions in the last 8 to 10 years. So they're well on their way to meeting those goals. They're also engaged in a significant program of working on the basis for renewable energy and greater efficiency and resilience. This is a major effort. It could go faster. It could entail really looking at the necessity of having bases in particular places. Now, what we have is a legacy system where you keep a base because you've always had a base there and you believe that it should be there, in part because people think that it's going to bring them jobs, or it has brought them jobs in the past, or they believe that it's important for a certain doctrine. But often the research shows that the bases don't bring as many jobs as an alternative use. And for instance, if you turn some of these into another land use, then you'd get more jobs and you could have greater energy, for instance, renewable energy. But the military itself is at the forefront of some of this research. So I think it's actually quite exciting.
Thank you so much. I've entered into the chat as part of evidence links to the climate plans I was referring to. I found the Army, the Navy, and the Air Force. I could not find one for the Marines, but in my reading, for example, of these, my impression was that troop readiness seems to be the main focus of the military preparation, and I did not see as much, and this is where I'm kind of getting to what's germane for Oahu and our Climate Change Commission, less so for the installations, which you've stated, and I just kind of wanted to affirm if there's other reports or documents that I might have missed that you think might be out there, or if these are like the primary ones.
Well, they have a climate risk analysis and they have some reports. I was just looking at one today. They're very technical reports. I can send you links to them. They have an effort underway, for example, to do microgrids in as many places as possible, and that's on installations. And if you look at these plans, they are focused on operations because their aim is to make sure that the United States can do its mission, its military mission, which is to control outcomes anywhere in the world at any time. And they believe that there's benefits to reducing fuel use for operations. But they also are in line with the Biden administration's goals of whole of government response to climate change, right? So that does include installations.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to reflect on the fact that we were able to invite to present Mr. Joe Martin, who is the director for PACOM's Climate Change Impact Program, and it was all totally like the military doing these things in other nations, and we were unable to find someone doing that same cognate program here in Hawaii. So I'm glad that I see those progress. Maybe it's not fast enough. I wanted to return, since I see raised hands, to Commissioner Otsuka and then Commissioner Keener.
Commissioner Keener, do you want to go first? I saw you pop the link in the chat. I had a related but maybe
Yeah, maybe.
topic question.
Thank you, Kiana. Yeah, just really quickly, and I see that Director Gonser put a link in there too, but this is very timely because actually this morning I just saw that the Biden administration just released updates to all of the federal agency climate adaptation plans. And they actually are having a briefing summarizing kind of the changes that are coming out of this. And I think that's next week, but I signed up this morning. But one of the biggest things, the differences that I could tell is that these new adaptation plans include a common set of kind of sustainability climate indicators across all of the different agencies. And I haven't had time to dig into it yet because it just came out this morning. But yeah, I think that they'll probably talk about that at the agency or at the briefing as well. And yeah, I can find that and send it, or I'll put that in here as soon as I can find where I signed up. But yeah, timely. And so I'm sure there are new military climate adaptation plans as well.
So much, Commissioner Otsuka.
Yeah, I have a couple of things, Chair, so please stop me at any point if anybody has a question or wants to give more comments. I thought maybe a good follow-up to this presentation might be to invite the Department of Health and then their counterparts who worked on updating the greenhouse gas emissions inventory. So I don't know about the other sectors, but the transportation sector pulls out specifically military aviation, military marine, and then military ground. So I don't know how accurate that is. I don't know how they come up with the data, but that might be an interesting, if we're interested in pursuing this topic a little bit more, to have them come talk story with us about maybe what they're doing to measure, and then hopefully we can find someone who can also talk about mitigation. Maybe that's kind of our way in. The second thing I wanted to share is in my full-time job as a transportation planner, my agency has been meeting with some of the military bases to figure out how we can better serve both civilian and non-civilians to get to and from work and or bases. So traditionally bases are planned really for vehicle use only. And so we're looking at how can we better serve getting people to and from work. And I think there's a really good opportunity right now because I think the state is trying to capitalize on the FLAP funds. So it's called Federal Lands Access Program. So it's a federal pot of money. I think it's 100% renewable, 100% federal funding, not renewable energy, 100% federal funding, whereby the project would improve access to a federal land. So all of the bases are all federal land. So those are all eligible also. So I think there's a lot of chatter and I think there's a lot of interest in this topic more broadly. And we're just starting up a working group with the feds to talk about how we can better spend FLAP funds statewide. So I can give you any updates as soon as you start getting that going. If there's any, I think, relevant things I can also share at our meeting. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Wanting to again respect Dr. Crawford's time, but wanting to open it up to the public who are here. If any of you have any questions on the presentation testimony that she gave, please raise your Zoom hand so I can recognize you. Also want to open it up to Director Gonzer if you have any questions from your department as well, from your office.
Sure. While the meeting participants are thinking of their potential questions, just echoing again a thanks to Dr. Crawford. A lot of material for us to reflect on as we then also collectively put a lot of links into the chat. Certainly here on Oahu, we're quite familiar with the partnerships between the bases and our utility and some of the sort of energy resilience that they've been intending to do for themselves, primarily for mission readiness and the like, and had a similar line of thinking to Kiana in terms of on base, off base, who's able to get and how to get there. There's been a long history of improvements in the military housing on base that, quite frankly, we could learn a lot about outside of the fence line, because they know it's also just more efficient, more effective, and good business in a lot of regards. My last comment really isn't a question, but again, your presentation, a lot of material to reflect on. I recently saw a clip from Carl Sagan in the early 90s reflecting on the amount of money that the United States spent on the Cold War in the tens of trillions on a issue that wasn't 100% certain, but we know where climate change is going in a lot of respects, and the military, because of the contingency planning that they do, they've been, whether openly or not, depending on the administration, talking about the work that they're doing. And I also greatly appreciate that global map you offered. And I might paraphrase or get what you said wrong, but you said something to the effect of there's a different world that's possible in a lot of respects in terms of the military composition and how we work with other nations and what that means for climate, resources, and emissions. So thank you again. I learned a lot.
Thanks. Can I respond to something that, two things that were said, one by Commissioner Otsuka and the other by Mr. Gonzer. The first is, you talked about aircraft, and aircraft are the largest source of military emissions. All kinds, transport, bombers, helicopters, these are really thirsty machines. And there is a way to use alternative fuels in them. They've been tested. Now, the problem with alternative fuels, however, like biofuels, there are many problems with those, but they don't have to be so thirsty and so greenhouse gas emitting. The second thing I wanted to say is that the military did the funding in the late 1950s and early 1960s of the research that we now depend on to understand climate change. So the Office of Naval Research funded the work of Roger Revelle, Hans Suess, and other scientists who are famous, like Charles Keeling, for coming up with our understanding of emissions and CO2 concentrations and the carbon cycle and the way it has been broken by industrialization. So the military for decades has understood climate change now, which is one of the reasons why they, in 1998, did not want to include military emissions in the counting for the Kyoto Protocol, because they felt that if they had to reduce their emissions for climate reasons, they would reduce their operational effectiveness. But as I showed you, they're able to prosecute wars with even lower emissions. The Army has reduced by 42% its total emissions in the last 10 years. The Navy by 15% its total emissions, and the Air Force by 27%, right? And they're still effective. So they can do that. But the real game in town here is reducing the footprint of the military, and then also reducing global tensions so that we can focus the resources that Sagan talked about on the really certain challenges of our time, not the possible risks of war.
Thank you so much for that commentary. I'm not seeing a lot of activity in the chat. I know that this was a new addition to the agenda, and so perhaps that's why our regular audience might be a little bit not prepared at the moment. We're also discussing another heavy topic today, which is the impact of the intersection of the tourism industry on impacts in Hawaii. So I know a bunch of folks here are also ready to look at that. And honestly, we should probably look at the intersection of the history of militarism and the development of the tourism industry. For sure, there's a lot of intersections there. In the meantime, I just want to thank you again on behalf of the Climate Change Commission for your time that you spent in presenting this information. This presentation is being recorded and is going to be available to the public. I encourage everybody to rewatch this, to share this information as we consider all the impacts of to our home of Hawaii and Oahu in particular. So again, thank you so much for your time.
Oh, thank you. And I see you have Kyle Kajihiro with you, who's an expert in so many more ways than I am. So you're lucky. Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you so much.
Good night.
Aloha.
Or good
night.
morning.
Good morning.
Bye.
Bye. And so commissioners, since Dr. Crawford did bring up that Dr. Kajihiro is on online, and I was wondering if, I don't know, Matt, maybe you can advise me the best way to do this. I was just thinking, since he's teed up, maybe we could ask him to present next. That way we can just keep all of this information close together. Is that all right? Or do I have to ask for a vote to amend the order? I don't. Okay, since we're kind of already on this roll of talking about military, a possible, getting informed about the impacts of military on climate change and potentially Oahu's climate risk, I'm going to ask if Dr. Kajihiro, if you are prepared to present.
Aloha.
Yes?
Thank you.
Aloha.
Yes.
Great, awesome. And please feel free to share your screen. We've made it possible so that you can share your screen for your talk.
Okay, great. Thank you. Let's see. Okay. Everyone see that all right?
Yes.
So aloha kako. Thank you so much to Commissioner Allegado and members of the commission for this invitation. That's a hard act to follow. Professor Crawford is such a important expert on the military climate impacts, and it was someone that we've been working with. So I'm so happy though that you had her come in and share her information, her research with you. We're hoping, by way of a little advertisement, she will be coming through Hawaii in July. So we're hoping that we can have another event where she can talk more about the study she's doing on the emissions related to RIMPAC exercises. So, and a little bit of a disclaimer about myself. I am an assistant professor of ethnic studies at UH Manoa. My research is mainly on the military's environmental impacts, but I'm not an expert on climate change. So what I did today is put together some sketches of what I think are some of the military's impacts on the environment that may have a compounding effect with regard to climate. So, and I want to also acknowledge upfront that as Professor Crawford mentioned, the military was one of the first agencies to really start to research and understand anthropogenic climate change. And they've been a leader in so many ways in terms of installing renewable energy on their infrastructure, doing research into alternative sources of energy. But again, a lot of it is geared towards their operational needs, and they don't necessarily provide benefits to the surrounding communities. So I'm going to look at some of these ways that the military's presence might compound or exacerbate climate risk. Oh. So we're all, sadly familiar with the disaster in Lahaina with the fire, and we're all expecting that wildfires, extreme storm events are already and will continue to get worse with climate change. We're also here on Oahu very acutely familiar with the crisis at the Red Hill fuel spill and the threat that it posed to our drinking water. And of course, this is directly linked to the dependency on fossil fuels to operate these military bases. It caused a tremendous environmental and social impacts, and we're still sorting that out in the courts and in the medical institutions, as well as trying to address the cleanup of the tanks, even though they've been defueled, decommissioning those tanks and then figuring out what happened with the fuel in the aquifer and how to remediate that is going to be a much longer and technical process. What I want to think about too is how militarization over the long term have compromised some of our important biocultural systems that have made life on this island possible for so many years, right? So this is a map of Keawalau o Pu'uloa, otherwise known as Pearl Harbor. It was made in 1873. So this was prior to the U.S. acquiring use rights at Pu'uloa for a coaling station. It shows the extent of agricultural and aquacultural development that was there, and gives just some indication of the kind of resources that Kanaka Maoli were able to intensify in a sustainable way with their science and their engineering to create this kind of biocultural food system that was very productive and made Pu'uloa an aina momona, a fat and abundant land. Sadly, this is a map showing the Navy Superfund sites on Oahu, and you can see that the yellow outlined areas are all the Superfund site boundaries. So what was once this abundant food source has become a giant Superfund site, and with hundreds of individual contaminated sites within it. And the timeline for actually addressing these extends decades, if not centuries, at the rate that they're going. Their progress is very slow in terms of cleaning these up. Overall, this map comes from the Hawaii Military Land Use Master Plan. So there's about 142 military sites in the islands, about 220,000 acres. Based on my calculations, about 68% of the military's land holdings come from the Hawaiian Land Trust, otherwise known as the ceded lands. So these are the former government and crown lands of the Hawaiian Kingdom. And therefore, you know, there is a kind of a lingering or historical impact on Native Hawaiians and their sovereign claims, as well as ongoing impacts on our community. And then this map here shows the military sites on Oahu, again from the Hawaii Military Land Use Master Plan. So based on my calculations, it's about a quarter of Oahu is occupied by the US military. And I want to point out here that this map, I think it's a little misleading because it includes owned and leased lands. But there's a huge area here in the central northern Ko'olau Mountains, which is, I think the military has an easement in the Kauai Loa training area. So that area in some maps is also included as a military footprint. So thousands of acres there in that vicinity. So some of the risks associated with the military presence, of course, military training involves explosions and fires, and that's a constant threat. And so here you have a picture from the Leilani fire a few years ago at Pohakuloa. But there's been many fires on Oahu. If you live in central Oahu, you may have seen some of these fires up at the Schofield training area. Out at Makua Valley, they've recorded more than 200 fires over the last 20, 25 years. Some say over 250 fires. And so these fires have had the effect of basically destroying the dryland forest ecosystem, encroaching into some of the upland forests, endangering the native species, but also inviting invasive species to then fill in the burned areas, which then creates a cycle of greater fire risk because these vegetation are more adapted to fires. The other thing that happens on live fire ranges, though, is the unexploded ordnance. So this is a problem in Makua. It was a problem at Pohakuloa in the Leilani fire. They couldn't go into certain areas to fight the fires because of the risk of these ordnance going off. And then, of course, unexploded ordnance in the environment can also cause their own wildfires. Sometimes you have white phosphorus, for example, that can spontaneously start fires. And so this is also a hazard that's linked to the live fire ranges. And we have many sites that are formerly used defense sites. So they call this the FUDS program. These are lands that were formerly used by the military that are no longer controlled by the military, but that may have a hazard. And so this program involves making agreements with the landowners to go in and investigate. And so this map from the Army Corps of Engineers, if you look at these pink polygons, these are all areas that have military munitions response sites. So these are all areas that were formerly used as live fire training. They potentially have, or they do have, or potentially have unexploded munitions and are undergoing a lengthy process of investigation and remediation. And so these are potentially places that could be hazardous in the event of a fire event. And if you look at the one here near Central Oahu, I think there have been a number of fires in that area near Kaukunahua Gulch. And so those areas become more hazardous to actually fight the fires. Another effect or risk associated with the military bases is how certain areas of the island, such as Waianae, are at high risk for wildfires, but it's also exacerbated by the fact that there's only one road in and out of the west side. And so it creates these evacuation choke points. You have in Waianae a high concentration of military controlled land. By some estimates, about a third of Waianae's land is controlled by the military, including the Kolikole Pass in Lualua Valley, which is really the only alternative access route. But because of the military control and also the disrepair of the road, it's not available as an escape route. So again, and then if you consider the fact that Waianae is one of the areas that have some of the highest rates of poverty, of other kinds of social problems, it becomes an environmental justice issue where they're exposed to greater risk because of where they live and because of the things that are surrounding them. And just another way to think about the exacerbated risk. So the military economy is second to tourism, of course. We're hugely dependent on military spending, but the military economy also produces certain inequalities, right, that can exacerbate poverty and vulnerability. So if you take the cost of housing, for example, the military basic housing allowance, which can be anywhere from $3,000 to almost $5,000 per month on top of the pay. That housing allowance will give an advantage to a military family if they were renting or buying a home, which allows them to outcompete local residents who don't have this subsidy, right? And so it's contributing to, I think, the problem of Native Hawaiians and Pacific Islanders, especially, being disproportionately represented among the houseless. And because of where they're situated, houseless communities are situated, again, many of them concentrated in the west side and on the east side and North Shore. These communities can be also vulnerable to climate change effects, whether they're fires or extreme storm events. And of course, Professor Crawford covered this, and I would highly recommend her book. But military greenhouse gas emissions are part of what she analyzes as a sort of deep cycle, right? An intensification of militarization and empire and global capitalism, which was fueled by the advent of fossil fuels, which then leads to wars over the resources, social and environmental crises, and then the displacement of populations, which produces more insecurity and leads to further militarization. So it becomes this kind of escalating spiral. And as she mentioned, the exemption of military emissions from Kyoto protocols means that we lack a lot of data that we need to make decisions about the military's impacts. And as we also talked about, the RIMPAC exercises, which are due to begin in a few weeks or a few days, is going to be the largest ever. And we still don't have a clear picture of the climate impact. So we're looking forward to Professor Crawford's report on the estimating the climate impact of the RIMPAC exercises. And I think that that methodology will also allow us to do better analysis of other training events and how they're contributing to the climate change. And I just want to mention something that's happening right now, which is the Army has a draft environmental impact statement for training lands that it wants to retain on Oahu. 3 sites in particular, Makua Valley, Kahuku, and Poamoho in the Kawailoa area. So these are lands that the state leases to the Army for $1 for 65 years, and those leases expire in 2029. And so I'm working with some of these community groups that have been trying to get these lands cleaned up and returned, especially Makua Valley, where there's been a long-standing effort to stop the military training there. So I don't know if this is something that the Climate Commission will ever testify on, but I just want to point this out, that this is an opportunity that the deadline for comments is August 7th. And so just in closing, just some thoughts. Again, the military is a major contributor to greenhouse gas emissions, yet is exempt from reporting, and so our data is incomplete. These wider military, social, and environmental impacts in Hawaii exacerbate the climate justice impacts and vulnerabilities. So these may increase certain hazards such as wildfire risks, UXO hazard, contamination threats, as well as the social inequality of these impacts. And then, the military primarily approaches climate change as a security problem, something to be concerned with instability and wars that are exacerbated by climate change. They look at it as mitigation and adaptation challenges, and as disaster response, as well as an alternative energy source. But a lot of it is focused on their ability to continue operations. And so for the Honolulu to really have accurate and meaningful climate change plans, we need to consider these military impacts on the climate and factor those in. So that's all I have today. And I will stop sharing and happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Kajihiro. That was really, really excellent. Particularly appreciate the really succinct and clear impacts that you identified with regard to how environmental impacts exacerbate climate resilience. So at this time, I'm going to start with asking the commissioners if they have any comments or questions. I'm going to get started with Vice Chair Keener.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Kajihiro. That was great. A really interesting and informative presentation. I was wondering if, so kind of on a broader scale, I know that Chair Aligado has been trying to get more representation from military on the island in these commission meetings to talk about this. Rosie, what was the name of the group that said they weren't ready to talk to us yet because they were just formed, but
Yes, it was actually at the state level. I have them on my to-do list actually to re-invite.
I know we were supposed to circle back with them, so we can find out what that name is, but I was wondering if you had any contact with them or maybe know
Matt, can you
how
share?
they're planning on looking at kind
This
of
is a-
the local impact.
Is it a military, or you said it's a state group, a state entity?
It's
Yes.
state and military coordination, but it's through the
Oh,
state
okay.
and it's specifically
Sorry.
around climate.
Sorry,
Um,
I am not. I really am. I'm kind of a novice at the climate change analysis. So I am learning, and Professor Crawford's work has been really helpful in thinking about how to trace these some of the hidden pathways of how fossil fuels enter the cycle, and how to analyze it. So I'm looking forward to the impact report, but I haven't yes, I haven't been.
Oh, yes. Okay, I found it. It's a newly formed Department of Military and Community Relations.
Oh,
Yeah,
Okay,
and
maybe it's
the folks who are in that office, I believe, are John McAllister Moore. So we will be re-inviting them to see, now that they've been established for a couple months, to see what their priorities and their outlook and agenda might be for the coming years.
so this is a whole new department.
Yes, we were
Wow.
just, yeah, we learned about them in April,
Mhm.
after our April commission meeting where we had invited Joe Martin. Vicky, remind me, he's the director for the Center for Excellence in Disaster Management and Humanitarian Assistance. And so it's very outward looking. It's like what the US does abroad to help with climate disasters. And then he recommended to us there was this newly formed office. So we invited them, but they were like, we just formed. We're finding our feet. So please invite us in a couple months.
yeah, but Dr. Kajihiro, even so maybe they're not climate focused, so that sounds like it might even be more relevant to like you're interfacing with them going forward.
Yeah, but it looks like they're under DBED. Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Interesting.
Anything else, Commissioner Keener? Okay, great. Commissioner Romine, do you have any comments, feedback, or questions?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Kajihiro, for the presentation. Very informative. I'm learning a lot this afternoon from these presentations, so I really appreciate it. I'd be interested to get your thoughts, and this is probably something for us to continue to investigate for the commission meetings to follow. But the U.S. military, I'm assuming, I think I've heard, has a very large research and development budget as well. And I think maybe you touched on this a little bit. I need to go back and review Mr. Martin's presentation again, but there is, I think, and it is probably potential for a lot of research into alternative energy forms. I think the military is interested in that for a readiness perspective, as much as a climate resilience perspective. But are you aware of kind of alternative energy projects at the military, with the military, that are happening in Hawaii that may be ripe for partnership with local government and that could possibly
Well,
inform local solutions?
So my information is sort of sketchy, but I remember some years ago they had I think the Office of Naval Research was funding some biofuel projects, maybe on Hawaii Island, if I'm not mistaken. They also had funded some wave energy research out at the Kaneohe Marine Base. Someone who might know more about these efforts is Henry Curtis with Life of the Land. He's been tracking a lot of these alternative energy programs. Oh yeah, the wave energy. So and then they've just done a much better job, I think, of outfitting the military housing and buildings and things with solar, and so yeah, I want to acknowledge that they've been able to mobilize those resources to that effect. And like you said, mainly around readiness, but also for climate resiliency. My concern is about some of these other areas where they have a negative effect on the environment and habitats, and then how that might exacerbate a vulnerability in those communities. And this is where there's inequalities produced geographically, right? So west side of the island, which is exposed to more of these risks and hazards, bear a greater risk than some other areas of the island.
Thank you.
Commissioner Romine? Oh yeah, thanks.
That-
Commissioner Otsuka, do you have any comments, questions, or feedback?
Yeah, first, Dr. Kachihiro, I just want to say thank you so much for your presentation. It was really informative. Secondly, regarding your comment about the folks on the Waianae coast being sort of disproportionately impacted by military operations, do you have any sense of what came first? Do you feel like it's exacerbating, or do you get maybe it's more of the cause of a lot of these issues?
What came first in terms of the social problems and then versus military presence?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
I mean, I think Waianae was always a place that problems were pushed to because it's a hot side of the island. It's also where Hawaiian Homelands was put. So I think there are many ways that Waianae was sort of seen as a place to push problems out of sight. But it was also an area that was convenient for the military. So we have these huge land areas. Lualua is like 8,000 or 9,000 acres military base. Some of the best farmlands in Hawaii, but it's behind barbed wire. And then Makua Valley. And then if you include the Waianae Uka, the strip that goes across the Waianae Range and up to the Ko'olau, that goes through where Schofield Barracks is, right? And some of those training areas. So it's just that there's so much of military land that so much of Waianae's land is used by the military. And then you have, because of the poverty and because of the way that communities have, like the houseless end up getting pushed to the end of the road, you just have this contrast, right? Of land use in that area. I don't think the military caused all of it, but certainly some families were displaced when the military came into Waianae. Like in Makua Valley, for example, the families were evicted when the land was taken after World War II. So it was through an executive order that they were told to move, and then they got sort of scattered and dispersed. I think so there's patterns like that, I think, throughout the islands, not on huge scales, but definitely it affected certain communities more than others.
Chair, can I ask a quick follow-up question?
Of course.
I think I'm trying to understand, like, from our perspective, like, if we do take this on as a guidance document, like, what the angle of environmental justice should be in our document. So, like, what I thought about when you were saying you were responding to me is like, were these places cited, like these training places cited because like they knew that this was a population that was sort of disenfranchised and like they could maybe cite something somewhere without very much pushback, or I think I'm just trying to understand like the
Oh,
environmental justice
right.
aspect of it. Yeah. Is that
So
easier to understand if I ask it in that perspective?
sure, yeah, let me
Okay.
see if I can clarify a bit more. So I think these areas were from, at least from in terms of where the military selected their sites, right? They selected areas that were more distant and considered remote for the training areas because they wanted those spaces to be open and to not have any competing land use. Um, Something like Lualole, they needed a big open space because it's also connected to the receivers in Wahiawa and Whitmore. So they needed the distance between these facilities for transmission and reception of these radio signals. Um, I think it coincides with the fact that these are areas where Native Hawaiians were pushed to, that tended to be neglected, and also tended to be places where trash and waste, the landfills for municipal and industrial waste are put on those sides because these communities are seen as more less powerful, I guess, less influential. So it's not like I don't think there was any intention of like we're going to dump it on these people in particular, but I think the confluence of these factors is a structural problem that you know displaced people, people that are poorer than other communities tend to be the ones that can't fight back as well, and are often in places that are more attractive for these kinds of projects that have environmental impacts.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm noting in the chat that Nancy McPherson from DHHL is here and has put a comment in the chat. Nancy, would you like to speak for a bit?
Hi, Kyle. It's been a long time.
Hi.
Dr. Kajihiro. So Hawaiian Homelands, that was all Hawaiian Homelands at one time. The military took over Lualule and we got some of it back. There was a blast zone. We've had to relocate people. There were a naval magazine meant they were storing a lot of explosives out there. And then there was a Hawaiian Homelands Recovery Act. And my understanding is that DHHL, until recently, was still claiming that that's Hawaiian Homelands and that the federal government needs to make the Homelands Trust whole. So I'm not really sure where that stands right now, but I know that Hawaiians have gotten the short end of the stick when it comes
Right.
to Lualule.
Right. So what I understand is not all of Lualule was Hawaiian homelands. I think a lot of it was Hawaiian, like ceded lands, right? Government and crown land. But a portion was Hawaiian homelands and was taken by the military during the war. So in that legislation that tried to sort it out, they did a land swap where land that was considered excess at Kalailoa, Barbers Point, was given to DHHL in exchange for the land in Lualole. So the Navy now claims that land in fee. And then the other parcels at Kalailoa were supposed to be more valuable for development purposes and so forth. But I don't know how
Right.
far that they've gotten with that. Yeah.
No, that's still in process. And the problem is it's all karst. and
Uh,
there's, you know, sinkholes and caves and cultural resources. So a lot
endangered
of it really
species.
isn't that usable. And there's been a pattern with the Navy or with the US military of doing that. We got land that had unexploded ordnance on it, you know, it was used for exercises like during World War II. And
Right.
so, yeah, it's a big old mess.
I mean, the other thing I think that related to DHHL is that wasn't there supposed to be a commitment when there are excess lands available? DHHL is the first right of refusal on that, or
Yeah, but that
they sort of
hasn't
reneged on that,
happened.
right?
Yeah, Hunt got a bunch of the land that was good for affordable housing, and they just went around DHHL basically.
Yeah. So I think Rick Perez wrote a great series of articles on that, exposing that problem. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Are there others from the public who would like to ask questions or make comment or feedback on Dr. Kajihiro's testimony? Okay, seeing that we have not, but we had a very fruitful discussion and conversation, I want to thank Dr. Kajihiro again for coming and providing testimony. And really, I think very, very clear to us, although complicated, as Commissioner Otsuka brought up, especially the piece on environmental justice. But I think we can clearly see that given the US military globally's huge impact and emissions contribution, and of course, definitely on Oahu, that I had heard but did not fully appreciate that it was their exclusion or exemption from the Kyoto protocols that provides this data gap. I think that there's a lot to talk about. So at this time, I would just really like to thank Dr. Kajihiro for coming today. Mahalo.
Mahalo. Thank you so much for having me. Take care.
Thank you. Okay, at this time, just because I'm going to wrap this up one more time, the final discussion point is discussion on a brief. And for that, I'm going to share my own screen. So let me see if I can make the technology work. All right, second desktop. Yes, slideshow. Let's see, slideshow really quickly. Okay, can you see my screen? Yes, okay. I just wanted to summate some of the things that I'd been hearing and gathering information on as we think about deciding whether or not to evaluate the impact of US military operations on Oahu's vulnerability to climate change. Again, the purpose and goal of this document, as always, is to bring together the most up-to-date information on the impacts to Oahu's ability to maintain and improve climate resilience. And to identify military activities that might increase climate risk on Oahu and identify military activities that decrease climate risk for Oahu. And we have heard, you know, a number of balancing kind of perspectives today around what the military has done that has really helped to inform our knowledge of climate change, as well as alternative fuels investments, as well as, you know, building codes, and then other kind of things that we really do need to consider. And I think really germane to our task as the commission to identify information gaps, maybe communication gaps between the city and the military that would improve resilience. So I think just in terms of thinking about how to approach this, if we were to think about it, what I could imagine is we would want to have a very prominent section on greenhouse gas emissions as well as mitigation, a general accounting. It would be really important to understand energy use, both civilian and non-civilian, but you know, that is related to military, again, transportation, ground, air, and sea, as well as the really important steps that the military is taking towards decarbonization. And it's been called out a number of times, in particular, you know, strides forward in terms of solar and wave energy. Then, of course, as far as thinking about climate adaptations and resources, really thinking about the lands relating to military training and readiness. I think Dr. Kajihiro pointed out the risks as far as wildfire, as far as unexploded ordnance. Also kind of thinking about the non-vital, non-training lands. What about pollution of the water supply, as this will increase our overall lack of resilience in the future. Thinking about the maintenance of these lands, there something not mentioned today is that the Army Natural Area Reserve have participated in a lot of reforestation and restoration of lands, and then of course building code advances. Other additional concerns that I've heard over the course of the discussions today is what is the state of or status of communication between the city and the military on Oahu around access during climate emergencies? I think that particularly with regard to vulnerability on the Waianae Coast, I think that could be a really important question to have some kind of really fast response on. And then, as I have brought up before, there is this Office of Climate Change Impact Program. Is there an office analogous to that that's looking at climate impacts for the installations, particularly in Hawaii? And then something else that I kind of threw down only because I was like, well, it has the word Army in it, but I wasn't sure if it related to the military, this brief, is how does the Army Corps of Engineers address climate change? And so these are just things that I've picked up in the gleanings. I kind of was doing this on the fly as everybody was giving their presentations. I think as part of this analysis, it might be important to look at military investments in climate change mitigation and adaptation. What is budgeted nationally? As I said, the Biden administration has mandated the federal agencies to put out climate change plans. Also thinking about beyond the fence policies and how the military is prioritizing spending for its neighbors and the places which it occupies. And I think the really big question is, as leasees in Hawaii, what are the obligations of the U.S. military to maintaining and even increasing the resiliency of this land? So those are just, I will share this. I literally just made this on the fly as I was listening to the presentations. I'm going to stop sharing screen right now and open it up for discussion with the other commissioners. Okay, going to start with Commissioner Otsuka.
Oh, Chair, I was wondering, do we want to have a specific call out of RIMPAC given Dr. Crawford, or sorry, Professor Crawford's presentation?
Sure,
See,
absolutely.
I'm not sure that it won't be in Hawaii, at least in the near term.
Yes, I think that's a good idea. Thank you. I didn't add that to my presentation, and I will. Thank you. Commissioner Keener?
Yeah, I feel like my thoughts here are probably less relevant given my transition off of the commission very soon. But you know, I think it's a worthy topic for the commission to take on in the future. I might suggest that maybe instead of a guidance document, we could use like the brief methodology. Because the guidance that we have, you know, again, with as a city commission, this is more general. I see it as more general and potentially more like a brief, like we did with the climate brief, that would have more general information that's usable by different groups rather than a specific, you know, Oahu and city agencies document.
That's a great suggestion. I'm going to write that down in my notes. Commissioner Romine, any comments?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. A few kind of general comments, kind of broad scale comments. It relates to scope if we're going to take on a document related to this topic, and I just think we need to remain conscious of what this city-based commission's role could be in this federal topic. Certainly, we heard about a lot of local impacts. So let's keep that in mind. What can we do with this? What are we charged with? And also related, I think, you know, we need to keep looking back at what we're charged with as a commission. And we heard a lot about really important, critical environmental impacts, but I think we need to remain focused on climate-related impacts. And there's certainly a lot of intersection with a lot of things we heard about and climate, but some that may be out of the scope of what we're charged with for this commission. So, but that's just a general comment. I just think we should keep that in mind as we're scoping out a document on this. And I'd also like to, it's important that we're outlining the impacts, the history, but I'd like to keep things solutions oriented as well. What are the opportunities looking ahead for the city? What are the recommendations we can point to for improved partnership with the military in addressing these shared challenges that we're facing? So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Romine. I think scope is always critical in any guidance document that we kind of take under advisement. And I also think that the utility of this commission is as a vehicle or vessel for our platform for increased education. And so even if the commission chooses not to take this up ultimately as a guidance document or a brief, I think that inviting possibly more people or more topics than we would want to cover specifically is a good idea for general education. And we never know, in the future, where we might begin to see stronger intersections and influences. So I appreciate your comments. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. One more thing really quickly. I appreciate your inclusion of the Army Corps of Engineers there. I think it would be possibly beneficial to have one of them, somebody invited from the Corps to come talk to us, because I think we could learn some important things from their work as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Otsuka.
I wanted to respond to Brad's question / suggestion. I don't, and I guess maybe also Vicky's comment also. I don't think I have enough like expertise on this topic, but what I thought about when you mentioned like what is the city's role, I was thinking about like, is there a zoning or permitting change that could be made to have the military kind of do best practice in resiliency or sea level rise preparedness, for example. And I don't know, I guess my what I'm most concerned with is I don't know what they do and don't have to follow. Like, do they follow some sort of special permitting process or policies that the city and county like doesn't enforce? I thought about I had read in it was a legislative bill this year, last year. I didn't know that members of the military don't have to pay, I think it's their vehicle registration fee or vehicle weight tax. So like we're not providing the same sort of financial disincentive, but we're also not getting that money in like our tax base to make transportation improvements, for example. So I think there are certainly, I just don't know enough about this topic to say like, is that within the jurisdiction of the city, for example? But I'd love to think about it a little bit more before we decide on brief versus guidance document. But those are some initial thoughts I had thought about in response to sort of Vicky and Brad's question about, is there city guidance that we want to provide?
That's great. I thank you so much. I think the contributions or maybe the systematic, I don't know what the right word is, the way that the systems are set up for the military and what they contribute uh, and what we might miss out on for city and county is definitely important to consider. I tried to look up as part of this how many people are part of the military in Hawaii and on Oahu, and I found an estimate that there are about 100,000 people in the military in Hawaii as a whole, and we can very easily kind of say that the majority of those are on Oahu, and so that's a huge, when we think about the city and county of Oahu is dealing with the people of Oahu, whether or not they're citizens, which is why we talk about tourism or not. I think the military community is an incredibly important aspect of that. So I fully appreciate that we have to build the arguments for, why we address this, why it's germane, and is there a role for the city to have, an opinion or feeling on that. So thank you all around. Opening it up to the public now for discussion on thoughts about the possible development of a brief or guidance document related to the military.
We have some comments from Nancy in the chat.
Nancy, do you want to talk? Thanks.
Well, I just was thinking, learning a lot about sea level rise and various lectures, Chip Fletcher and others, probably Brad too, is that the Navy is looking very seriously at dealing with sea level rise in their naval installations on both coasts. Norfolk, Virginia in particular, because that's also subsiding. and then San Diego. And, you know, you look at San Diego Harbor and it kind of reminds me a little of Pearl Harbor. It's very, very intense military installations. And they are working with the city of San Diego to look at opportunities for environmental restoration, nature-based solutions, that sort of thing. So I think there's some examples that we could look to. So I'd be in favor of us kind of checking some of that out and see if there might be room for initiatives on Oahu that just may not have been explored yet. I've been to Loco Pa'aiao. That's being restored. The Navy is supporting that effort as part of their, I think, NEPA Section 106 responsibilities. But that's kind of just a beginning, small kind, you know.
Absolutely. Thank you, Nancy. And I think, you know, as far as military obligations and what they can contribute to us, it's not just what Commissioner Otsuka mentioned as far as potentially lost revenues or tax base. It's also really opening a conversation as to saying how do they be a good steward as lessees, right? What are their and that's really what I meant as far as what are their obligations to have the privilege to be here in Hawaii and also being mindful and cognizant of the changes that are happening in their own installations. So definitely think that that's great. I appreciate sharing your example of the city of San Diego. Looking for synergies. I think as we proceed forward, if we proceed forward, it would be good to identify case studies where we can look to how those partnerships have been formed and forged. Thank you so much. Matt, you dropped a statistic in the chat. Can you please say it?
I haven't checked the most recent census data, but during the city's development of the Oahu Resilience Strategy, we had a similar learning moment. And I can't remember if it's state or just city and county of Honolulu here on Oahu, but something approximately about 10% of the population, I think during the research, 10% of Oahu's population was military personnel and or dependents. So it was a reminder of sort of the scale and the magnitude of the presence and what that means across a lot of the items that we're discussing here.
Okay, mahalo. Gonna have one more sweep to ask, and maybe Maya, if you can check online if there are any comments or questions about this suite of agenda items that we've addressed in the past large block of time. None on Facebook. Thank you so much. Okay, with that, we're going to return to our originally scheduled programming. And the next item on our agenda was a discussion on the action and election of chair and vice chair for the commission for the term of July 1 to June 30th, 2025. So as you know, Vicky and I are stepping off. We have termed out, and but also it's our time to step off and change leadership. And so I wanted to start with the position of the chair for the Honolulu Climate Change Commission. Are there any nominees for this position?
And feel free to self-nominate or nominate others.
And people who are not here can also be nominated.
I was just gonna ask that about Melanie, and I hate to nominate her and she's not here and she's not interested. So that was gonna be my question, not necessarily a nomination.
Okay.
So if I remember correctly, last month we did talk about this kind of in a more general discussion, and Melanie was asking questions, and she had, you know, am I remembering correctly, Rosie, that she was asking a lot of questions about, you know, what it entails and not volunteering, but not uninterested.
Yeah.
And is she the most senior?
She will be the most senior person once Vicky and I step down.
Yeah. Maybe Kiana and Brad, not to put you on the spot, although we have to put you on the spot. Do you want to like maybe just talk about what you may be interested in or timing in the future that you may be interested in? Because we don't want to nominate anyone for anything where they're not, you know, willing to step up.
Yeah, I feel hesitant to nominate Melanie for anything without her present at this time, and have a better sense of her willingness. I inevitably see that Kiana and I will have to take on leadership roles here eventually. So aware and ready to do that at this point. I'm hesitant to take on the chair position. Would consider the vice chair, but I don't want to, Kiana, if you had some interest in that position as well, please, go ahead.
So, Chair, do we have to pick somebody today because you term out June 30th?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Oh, shoot. I wish Melanie was here. Should we just nominate her, Brad?
I think we've
Like,
elected,
one of the bus nominator, but if we can, I guess maybe.
didn't we elect Chip when he wasn't there?
Yes.
So there's precedent.
Okay, Brad, should we nominate Melanie then? As
Okay,
the
if
senior
we do
person?
it,
Is that okay?
if we're nominating her together, then I don't feel as bad.
Okay.
in circumstances.
Okay, so one of you nominates and the other can second.
Okay, I'll nominate Melanie as the first.
And I'll second that.
Okay, so let's call for a vote. All in favor of Melanie Islam as the next chair of the Honolulu Climate Change Commission, please raise your hands. Okay, all in favor, none opposed. And we'll count Commissioner Islam is not present, so she
Okay.
cannot vote for herself. All right, moving on, perfect. Any nominations for vice chair? I thought I heard somebody say they were interested.
Willing, Kiana, how do you feel? Again, I think we're gonna have to do this eventually.
Yeah, I would be open to doing it, and supporting the vice chair. If you feel really hesitant.
By all means, yeah, go ahead.
Sure.
All right, well then maybe I nominate Kiana Otsuka as vice chair for the next term.
I second that nomination. Okay, all right. All are in favor of Kiana Otsuka as vice chair of the Honolulu Climate Change Commission, please raise your hands.
Do I vote for myself, or do I have to
You can
abstain?
think
vote
so.
for
Yep.
yourself. Yeah, you can vote for
Okay.
yourself. All right, none were opposed, and Commissioner Islam was absent. Okay, so with that, we have new leadership starting July 1. Awesome, congratulations. Okay, great. Moving on in our agenda, we are now going to return to the order, which is the report on the activities of the Office of Climate Change, Sustainability, and Resiliency.
Thank you,
Take away,
Chair.
Dr.
And I do want to acknowledge that Commissioner Islam could certainly be within her rights to decline, in which case we would think through an interim to get into a meeting and have a similar discussion as the next agenda item. But thank you for the opportunity to, as always, share from our office's perspective, both our specific work, but also work of the city related to climate change, sustainability, and resiliency. And they're not specific to our office. I do want to start with a sobering reminder around this climate moment that we're in, both nationally and globally, with such extreme heat all around the globe. Nationally, nearly 1/3 of the US population is under extreme heat alerts, or recently was. And though I haven't read really all the numbers around some of the national stories, recent stories globally do indicate hundreds to thousands of recent heat deaths in the past week or so. And just for context, locally, over the last 4 years, as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, here in state Hawaii residents, we've lost just over 2,100 of our friends, families, and loved ones. And that has happened at a scale in about a week's time in the globe, and likely more, because we know that measurements of heat stress or heat death are often underreported because of other associated impacts, or heat is a compounding factor for other issues. So I just share that because we would be remiss if we don't remind ourselves of the urgency of the work and the criticality of everything that we're trying to accomplish together. So just thank you all for your continued service in support of us here at the city and in service to community. And talking about community, because there's no easy way to pivot from that opening, last night concluded the 2024 round of mayor town halls. It's always a great opportunity to hear directly from community members all around the island, and we'll share a link in the chat where you could, if you're interested, look back at some of the recordings or some of the highlights from those meetings. And then similarly, if you're interested in getting monthly updates, not just from me, but from the mayor's office and our communications team on all the other kinds of things that are happening all around the island, whether it's DTS and the Vision Zero plan or other affordable housing efforts and initiatives that we're trying to lead, I'll put that in the chat as well so you can sign up and receive it directly. But specific to CCSR, last month, at the end of the month, on May the 30th, we celebrated actually the 5-year anniversary of the release of the Oahu Resilience Strategy. We've been reflecting on the progress, how we've been able to check off at least a quarter of the actions with a lot more underway. And it's a reminder of what it actually takes to have impact around the commitments and goals that we've set for ourselves to address climate equity, climate resilience, and affordability here on Oahu. And then again, just very briefly, since the last meeting of May the 24th, we continue to have all sorts of really great community engagements. A couple team members were out on the west side today talking to different community partners around granting and community resilience and community equity potentials. We can't do a whole laundry list, but I would encourage you to follow us at resilientoahu.org to see all those stories as they progress. We have several projects that are wrapping up either this month or next month, and I'd be more than happy to give a little bit more of like a snapshot or have the team members talk specifically about their initiatives at subsequent future meetings. And we also have some big initiatives that are soon to launch that I think the public and the commission would be interested in hearing more about. That's pretty cryptic because I'm not giving specifics. We want to make it exciting when we share back later. And then somewhat to wrap up, we all benefited from some recent national federal leadership. We had some meetings and site visits with FEMA National Resilience leaders, as well as our Region 9 hazard mitigation leadership. A great opportunity with the NOAA administrator, and I know he was kind of making the rounds. I saw him connecting with Sea Grant folks, et cetera, and that was really great too. To help them see what their initiatives and their funding means for us here on the ground locally was really great. As it relates to the agenda item we just went through, Mayor's Office has engaged with 2 candidates to step in for both Commissioners Allegado and Keener's positions. Just as a result of the steps and the process for confirmation at City Council, it currently looks like one of those commissioners could be confirmed at the August the 7th council meeting, with the other one, unfortunately, not until September the 4th. So with that note, I just wanted to remind and confirm, though they're not required, that both Commissioner Allegado and Keener are permitted to hold over for a meeting or 2 until such time that new commissioners are brought on board, but no obligation. And then lastly, though, I started this share out with obviously the very heavy and real acknowledgement of where we are in this climate moment. I want to end on a really bright spot in honor of the solstice and our full moon right now. This past Tuesday, we celebrated the groundbreaking of a very large solar and battery project at the Neil Blaisdell campus. So if you can imagine the very long linear Malkota Makai parking structure, now picture it with a total roof of solar PV canopy with a large battery that will then allow nearly all evening programs to be run on that backup battery power in the evening. So we're super excited. I think the schedule is actually this calendar year that it'll be completed, at which point in time, daytime operations will be nearly 100% solar renewable energy during the day, and then a vast majority, depending on the number of programs that are going on, run by that battery. So I'll put the news release in the chat in case you're interested in hearing some of the stats from that project. So with that, Chair, happy to take a pause and answer any additional questions.
Thank you, Matt. It has been my privilege over the past several years to hear all of the great updates that the office and its staff has done. And I just want to take this time to thank you so much for being a leader. And I know that you are the second director, but just continuing to lead the way in what we all really need here on Oahu. So mahalo. With that, I'll pass it on to Vice Chair Keener.
Yeah, Rosie, there's a comment in the chats from Maya regarding CCSR's heat messaging in collaboration with other counties, and she has a link to some of their heat messaging. So I'll just point that out. And then maybe just also point out that this is also relevant to the resilience hubs. I think, and providing the creation of resilience hubs and looking into creating those across the island as potential shelters from heat impacts. But thanks, Matt, for bringing that up and reminding us all of, although we are not in the heat dome right now that's affecting so much of the world, what is going on in a lot of places.
Commissioner Romine?
No comments or questions this time. Thank you for the update again, Director Gonzer.
Commissioner Otsuka?
Same, no comments, just want to say thank you.
Any comments, questions from the public at this time with regard to Director Gonzer's updates? Okay, seeing none, we will proceed on to the next item in our agenda, which is discussion on stakeholder feedback on in-development tourism and climate change guidance document. This is currently under myself and Vice Chair Keener's purview as the two permitted commissioner members who can work on guidance documents together. We have received even more feedback from our experts, and so rather than providing you with another what is the word I'm looking for? Presentation on the updates, because there's several and we need to just sit down and make substantive edits on that. What I will say is that we've just received additional input and we need more time to incorporate them. However, we did receive testimony from two individuals, Dr. Tan Kini and Mr. Corey Harden, on this issue. And so I would like to invite Dr. Kini to present his testimony at this time. And just remember, you have 3 minutes for your testimony. Thank you. I don't see Dr. Kini.
I think he is not on the call anymore.
Oh, he was on the call earlier. Okay.
Yeah.
We received testimony, PDF testimony regarding the tourism document, and I believe that is all available online. Is that correct, Matt? In the notes. Okay, so Dr. Kini's testimony, he has a long-standing interest on this. Was again in relationship to visitor aviation greenhouse gas footprint. And while I will never say that that is not an important and significant contributor to global emissions, we focus on a very broad set of impacts here in the tourism document, and we will take it into account. Commissioner Otsuka.
So I had an update on my follow-up items, and it's not particularly fruitful, but I did want to share, given we're not supposed to sort of three of us talk. So my two follow-up items was to talk to my colleague from OISC about invasive species and climate impacts in tourism. And then the other was to talk to my colleague at the Hawaii Food Police. And both of them have let me know that they don't have the capacity right now to give really thoughtful feedback. So my second question to you, Chair, was, and I know you're kind of rolling off, but I think we originally said like you want to wrap up feedback by now, but are you sort of extending that timeline a little bit so I can give them a heads up and see if we can get more feedback from them before sort of
We
formal feedback
We
time?
are we are
Okay.
extending it. Part of it is because of course we were wanting to get feedback from the Hawaii Tourism Authority and Westpac was happening. So that was a very, I mean, city and county had a huge part in it. Many entities across the state were very occupied this past time period. And so for the people that we really wanted to get impact their feedback from, there was a request to give them more time. So yeah, we are hoping to wrap it up with it by August, have our community feedback and so on and so forth.
Beginning of August, mid-August, late August,
Hmm.
your ideal timeline. I'll just pass the information on
I
to.
would say August 7th, which is hopefully when the new commissioner can come on board. It all depends on when you schedule your climate change commission meetings for
Okay,
August.
got it. Thank you.
Yeah. Commissioner Romine.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to find out when you would be soliciting comments from the commission on the tourism document again. Is that kind of a rolling thing? Can I send you comments on the latest draft PDF?
Yes, absolutely.
At any point? Okay,
Yes,
good.
the best way to do it is to send it to Karan, and Karan will distribute it so that we can remain in compliance with Sunshine.
Okay, thank you. I will send those over to Karan after this meeting.
Thank you. Any other comments or testimony from the public with regard to the tourism guidance document? Okay, seeing none, we're gonna roll right along into our next, which is discussion on tentative next meeting dates. Historically, we have had them near the end of the month on Fridays from 9 to 11, if that's something you want to continue, or you guys can change when you have the meetings. It's totally up to you.
I guess that's something to discuss with Melanie, huh? As the chair. I think generally I have conflicts on Fridays at 9, the second Friday and the third Friday generally. And then the rest of my month is open. But Brad, do you have any conflicts we should be aware of on the Friday?
Is that the last? It's not the last Friday of the month, right? It's typically the
Like
third.
the third Friday, typically?
Yeah, I'm good for that Friday in July. It looks like.
Okay. Does the 1 to 3 time block generally work, or is this difficult?
Yeah, that generally works for me and looks good for Friday, the 19th of July, if that's what we're looking at for the next one, potentially.
Okay.
I just want to suggest that Karan can potentially email out all the commissioners and survey their availability.
Okay, thank you, Karen.
And then if you wanted to provide some additional time blocks, she can do that and then, come up and then she can send the chair and the vice chair, like these are the times and then, narrowing it down to a couple slots. Okay.
Sorry, one more question for me. Do
Yeah.
you have like I think you said you and Vicky were starting a sort of shared folder of all the resources. Like, I think the one I'm probably most interested in is if you have like a documented copy of all sort of the ideas of guidance documents that have come up over the course of the meeting. So, for example, the topic we talked about today would be on that list, among others.
I have a drive folder that I've developed. It has processes that we've developed, template emails. It has how we develop, ideally how you would develop a document. I don't know that we have a running list of topics.
Yeah, I can look back in my notes. I know that the way we've generally done it is at the first meeting or second meeting of the new commission leadership's term. There's a larger discussion on the agenda item over what we should try and address this year, guidance documents or briefs that we should put out, larger topics to invite experts to come and provide testimony, which don't have to end up in guidance documents, but can help inform and educate the public and ourselves. So yeah, maybe the way we've done it in the past is kind of that first meeting, there's a dedicated discussion and everybody brings their ideas. What's a little different this time since we won't have the new commissioners on yet, and so we'd be missing their expertise and brainstorming in this. So I don't know what you'd want to do with that. Wait or like start something and then just kind of add it as people are sworn in.
Yeah, it might be a running agenda item that you could have for every
Mhm.
commission meeting is to just like refresh on that so that you can start and then also continue. Yeah.
Matt, I saw your hand was up before. Did we already talk about it?
Yeah, it was chair's recommendation and our offering that we can do a scheduling poll, obviously. But it sounded like for now, hold July 19, 1 to 3, and then perhaps the poll is to go out beyond that for recurring meetings as holds.
Okay. All right. If there are any questions, are there any questions from the public or comments or feedback?
I guess another question of next meeting is Melanie has to formally accept or decline. And that has to be done in the public meeting. Is there a way we could decide before the July meeting, with a public, if we call a really quick meeting just to affirm that, and we can just have one discussion or something on the leadership where she accepts or declines? Or
That is
should we
always
wait?
that is always possible. It just requires posting of an agenda 6 days in advance.
Yeah. 'Cause I can see how it'd be nice to roll with like new leadership kind of set at the July meeting. But defer to what the members staying on would like to do.
That seems like a good solution. Again, I think we're just waiting to see if Melanie's willing to do that. And yeah, I can certainly be available for a real brief meeting if we need to do a confirmation before the 19th. I think that's a good idea.
Great. Okay, at this time, we will move on to the next agenda item, which is public input for matters not on the agenda. Public, do you have anything you would like to share with us? Okay, moving on. Announcements. Any announcements that people would like to make? I have one that I wanted to share, but does anybody else have? I know Kiana, you often remind us of ongoing opportunities in the transportation area. So I don't know if you want to reshare opportunities.
Sure, and I have a new announcement also. So this is my monthly reminder about our state bike debate. So to qualify, you need to meet a certain income threshold, be enrolled in college or university, or not have a registered vehicle. So you can get up to $500 off of an e-bike or electric moped, 20%, whichever is less. So that's my monthly announcement. My second announcement is the Hawaii Conference of Planning Officials or Congress of Planning Officials. It's like our local planning conference. Is September 11th through the 13th in Kamuela on Hawaii Island. And they've just sort of like laid out the program, and there's quite a bit of climate change, sustainability, and resilience topics. So there's a bunch on sea level rise and resiliency. Brad, I think you presented last year too, yeah, on Oahu on a sea level rise panel.
I'm sorry, audio is a little hard for me to hear, Kiana. What event was that?
The Hawaii Congress of Planning Officials.
Oh yeah, yeah. I've often
Yeah.
done things of that. We talked a little bit about 1 or 2 sessions on managed retreat with sea level rise at that event.
Yeah. So if folks are interested, I can drop a link in the chat to the conference. And yeah, there'll be lots of climate change, sustainability related things. I'm presenting on shift workers and the wonders of government procurement, should you want to come listen to it. I think it's very exciting. Not super climate change related, but it can be. That's all for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Romine, do you have any updates or announcements?
Yeah, it is. It's more of an update. I was asked last meeting to look into the potential for Sea Grant to possibly provide some support to the commission through a graduate research assistant or otherwise. I'm sorry to say I don't have anything real affirmative or positive to report on at this point. I did kind of re-look into our internship and fellows programs, and we're kind of off cycle for right now. We've just had our Peter Rappa fellows start their summer programs, and they have real dedicated research projects over the 10-12 weeks of the summer. So I don't really think there's capacity there since their scopes have already been kind of laid out for the summer. The other opportunity could potentially be the Gordon Groff Fellowship. We have folks working right now under that fellowship, but they're already dedicated to other projects, and don't think we want to risk interrupting their work or scope of work there. Otherwise, the Sea Grant program, and Rosie, I know you're familiar with all this, but and many of you are here, but just to kind of reiterate, we support a lot of research, and through that research, graduate assistants. But again, those graduate assistants work for research PIs at the university on specific topics. And I guess there's the potential to maybe include some scope of work with a GA working with a researcher here on the campus through Sea Grant funding. But we've just finished our biennial funding cycle. Awards are being made in the last several months. It wouldn't happen again for another year and a half. So we're kind of off cycle on that. So I'm sorry to report we don't have anything obvious to help fill in for capacity support in the commission at this time. But Rosie, maybe we can kind of continue to think about it together if you have some more ideas. We really haven't been able to touch bases on it together, you and I. But that's kind of where things stand at this point. My understanding of what we could or could not provide on that topic at this time through Sea Grant. Sorry, I don't have better news on that.
Thanks, Brad. Commissioner Keener.
I'll let you do the Youth versus Hawaii announcement, but I guess just on the topic of funding, I don't know exactly how much I can scrape up, but I would definitely be willing to figure out how much Pacific RISA could continue to support a research intern to support the commission throughout the next year. And I also know that McKenna, who had originally gotten the Healy Foundation funding to support policy research for the commission, and has continued to help supplement that. Like, I'm not sure if she's still interested or able to contribute as well, or if that Healy Foundation funding is something that the commission or a commissioner could apply to get additional funding. But yeah, so I can scrape some funding together to support a researcher in conjunction with other funding.
Excellent. Okay, and I just wanted to share my announcement, which was that I think we all know yesterday there was a groundbreaking victory that was announced, that our youth plaintiffs in Navahini versus Hawaii State Department of Transportation was a constitutional climate suit, and they were able to achieve a really strong agreement with the state of Hawaii that establishes a greenhouse gas reduction plan, creates a lead unit and responsible positions within HDOT, establishes a volunteer youth council, improves transportation infrastructure, budgeting process, and really makes some ambitious investments in clean transportation. So I think this is really exciting. I invite you all to join the celebrants at Iolani Palace on Monday. I believe it's from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. And for full disclosure, I was privileged to be asked to be a expert witness in the trial, or in the case. didn't go to trial. So thank you. With that, we have 2 minutes, 1 minute remaining. We finished all the items on our agenda. I wanted to ask Commissioner Keener if she had any last parting thoughts as she steps down from her vice chairmanship.
Seems like I'll be here for another month or two, so nothing yet.
Excellent. I'll say the same for me. Commissioner Romine, anything you would like to add?
Well, I think we can conclude that you're done with your chair and vice chair duties. So, I just want to say thank you very much for all your time served on the commission, service to our community through this, and your leadership on the commission as well. Mahalo.
Thank you so much. We have reached the end of our agenda on time, I'm happy to say. And if there are no further comments, this meeting is adjourned. And it's the last time I get to say that.
Yay. Thank you, Rosie. Thank you, Vicky. Books are amazing.